I'm going to be honest right from the start, choosing a mobile workstation is one of those decisions that can feel a little overwhelming, especially when you're juggling budget, performance, and the need to actually get work done on the go. You want something that won't let you down when you're deep in a CAD file or rendering a video, yet you also don't want to spend more than you have to on a machine that ends up sitting idle most of the day. In this video I'm going to break down the Dell Precision 5530, what it's really like to use day to day, where it shines, where it falls short, and who should actually consider it. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, a quick look at the big picture. This is a 15.6-inch laptop that promises a Hexa-core i7-8850H, 16 GB of RAM, and a 0.5 TB SSD, all wrapped in a fairly slim chassis. On paper that sounds like a solid workstation for a freelancer or a small team engineer. But the real question is how those components translate into real productivity, and whether the price tag lines up with the actual experience you get. Let's start with the everyday workflow. I tested the Precision 5530 with a mix of SolidWorks assemblies, Adobe Premiere editing, and a few Python data analysis scripts. The i7-8850H, paired with 16 GB of RAM, handled multi-threaded tasks fairly well. When I opened a 200-component SolidWorks model, the laptop stayed responsive, rotations and zooms felt smooth, and the 1080p display gave me enough workspace to see details without constantly fighting for screen real estate. Rendering, however, is where the story gets interesting. Because the machine relies on integrated graphics rather than a dedicated GPU, rendering times were noticeably longer than on a similarly priced laptop that includes an NVIDIA Quadro. If you're the kind of user who does heavy GPU-accelerated rendering on a daily basis, the lack of a discrete graphics card will become a bottleneck. On the other hand, if most of your work is sepia-bound, think large datasets or code compilation, you'll appreciate the consistent performance the Hexa-core CPU delivers. Now let's talk about the SSD. A 512 GB drive feels roomy enough for a typical professional setup: OS, a handful of design files, some media, and a stash of backups. In practice, I found the drive was fast. Applications launched in a couple of seconds, and loading large project files was almost instantaneous. The downside is that the SSD is soldered, so upgrading storage isn't an option unless you're comfortable opening the machine and swapping the drive yourself, which isn't a trivial task. For most users that's fine, but if you anticipate needing more than 1 TB down the line, you might run into a problem. Battery life is another practical factor that often gets glossed over in spec sheets. With the heavy i7 processor, the Precision 5530 managed roughly 5 hours of mixed usage: emails, browsing, occasional video playback before needing a charge. In a real-world scenario, that means you'll likely be tethered to a power outlet for most of a standard 8-hour workday, especially if you're running demanding software. That's something to keep in mind if you travel frequently or work from cafes. On the flip side, the charger that comes with the unit is a fairly robust 130-watt brick, so you'll see a quick top-up once you plug it in. One of the subtler aspects of any laptop purchase is the keyboard and touchpad experience, and here the Precision 5530 gives a mixed signal. The keyboard has a decent travel distance and a firm tactile feel, which is pleasant for long typing sessions. However, the layout is a bit cramped on the right side, making it tricky to rest your palm comfortably if you have larger hands. The touchpad is responsive, but the click is somewhat shallow, which can lead to accidental clicks when you're trying to navigate precisely in a CAD environment. If you rely heavily on touchpad shortcuts, you might find yourself reaching for an external mouse sooner rather than later. Thermal performance is a hidden trade-off that can be easy to overlook until you notice the fan kicking in under load. The Precision 5530's cooling system does its job, but it's not silent. When I was compiling large codebases or rendering a video, the fan sped up noticeably, creating a low-level hum that can be distracting in a quiet office or a shared workspace. The chassis does get warm to the touch on the bottom, which could affect your lap if you work there for extended periods. That's not a deal-breaker for most, but it's worth acknowledging if you value a near-silent work environment. So, who should actually consider buying this machine? If you're a professional who needs a solid, reliable CPU for tasks like software development, data analysis, or moderate 3D modeling, and you don't rely on GPU-intensive rendering, the Precision 5530 gives you a respectable amount of power in a portable package. Its build quality, although not highlighted in the specs, feels sturdy enough for daily commuting, and the 1080p display provides clear, accurate colors A+ for anyone doing visual design work.